My name is Elaine Porter, and the moment I heard my husband tell his mother that living with me was hell and that he was only staying for the money, I felt something inside me split clean in half. It wasn't anger at first. It wasn't even sadness. It was a quiet, cold realization, like a window left open in the dead of winter, that the man I had shared a home, a life, and 22 years of marriage with had finally shown me who he really was. I wasn't supposed to hear it. He had meant to hang up the call, but he didn't. And as I stood in my kitchen that afternoon, still wearing my office badge around my neck, I listened to them laugh about me, as if I were a burden they simply had to endure. At 60 years old, you'd think moments like that would hit softer. But age doesn't cushion betrayal. It cuts as sharply at 60 as it does at 16. The phone had been sitting on the counter, connected to my car's Bluetooth. I had called him earlier, asking if he wanted anything from Kroger. He hadn't picked up. That wasn't unusual. He rarely answered on the first call, unless he wanted something. I had assumed he was busy. I put my groceries away, humming an old Eagles song, under my breath, trying to shake off the exhaustion of a long Tuesday. And then I heard his voice. A low murmur at first. I thought maybe the Bluetooth was glitching. But no, it was him. And then I heard the sharp, unmistakable voice of his mother, Lorraine, the woman who had always believed her son married beneath him. "You know she's sensitive," she said. "You shouldn't push her too hard. She might break." "Oh, please," my husband scoffed. "Living with her is hell, but I'm putting up with her for the money." They both burst out laughing. My hand froze on the refrigerator door. Everything in me went still. Every thought, every sound in the room dimmed until I could hear nothing but the thudding of my own pulse. I didn't move. I couldn't. I stood there, one hand on a carton of milk, staring at the faint reflection of myself in the microwave door. Was I really hearing what I thought I was hearing? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay perfectly quiet. The call was still open. Didn't he realize? Didn't he see my name on his screen? He kept talking. "She's so easy to manage. I act tired, annoyed, and she just backs down. Honestly, it's pathetic." Pathetic. That was the word that broke something. My fingers trembled as I lifted the phone. My first instinct was to hang up, to end the call before I heard anything worse. But something in me, some instinct born from years of being dismissed, overlooked, quieted, refused to move. I listened. His mother, never one to miss an opportunity, chimed in. "Well, if she's paying the bills, you should take advantage while you can. Lord knows she won't be around forever." A laugh. Another. I listened until the last word left his mouth, until I could no longer deny the truth. The man who vowed to honor and cherish me was enduring me the way someone endures a long line at the DMV, or a bad knee, or a leaky faucet. For the money. The call finally disconnected, probably when he looked at his phone again. But the damage was done. I slowly sank into a chair at the kitchen table, the one place in the house I felt I still had control. I pressed the heel of my hand against my eyes, trying to steady myself. I wasn't a dramatic woman. I wasn't someone who cried easily. I was practical, raised in small-town Ohio, where emotions were handled privately behind closed doors. But that day, sitting alone at my table, with the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock, I felt something sharper than heartbreak, something cleaner, something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. For so long, I had blamed myself for the distance between us. I told myself he was overwhelmed, that he was stressed, that his short temper had nothing to do with me. I convinced myself that the dinners he skipped, the holidays he didn't want to host, the vacations he canceled last minute, it was all just life. But hearing him speak freely, hearing the ease in his voice as he insulted me, to the woman who never wanted me in the first place, stripped away every excuse I had created. My marriage wasn't cracking. It had been broken, and I had been too loyal to see it. I took a slow breath and did something I had never done before. I replayed the last few minutes of the call in my head and asked myself one question. If he could speak about me that way, today, how long had he been doing it? The answer came quick. A long time. Maybe always. The thought didn't make me cry. It steadied me. I looked at the framed photos on the wall, Christmases, birthdays, trips we took back when we still held hands, without thinking about it. I didn't feel nostalgia. I didn't feel longing. I felt distance, like I was remembering a play I once performed in not a life I actually lived. My husband, with his easy charm and his practiced sighs, had underestimated me. He thought I was too soft, too obedient, too grateful he stayed. He thought I would keep paying the bills, keep forgiving, keep believing. But he forgot something important. I may be quiet, but quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet doesn't mean blind. Quiet doesn't mean safe to deceive. And as the clock ticked into the next hour, as the sun settled behind the neighbor's maple tree, as the last echo of his laughter faded in my mind, I realized that silence, my silence, might just become the sharpest weapon I had. The morning after that call, I woke up before the sun. I didn't sleep much. My mind replayed every word my husband had said, every laugh he shared with his mother, like a tape I couldn't switch off. But instead of waking with puffy eyes and a heavy heart, I felt strangely clear, alert, steady, almost as if my body had finally aligned itself with a truth it had sensed for years. He was still asleep, beside me, snoring lightly. For a moment, I looked at him, the way you might look at a stranger on a bus. No warmth, no familiarity, just detachment. That surprised me. After 2 decades of marriage, I thought I'd feel more. Something. Hurt, maybe. Anger. Fear. But instead, it was like a curtain had been pulled back, and I was seeing him plainly for the first time. I quietly got out of bed and went downstairs, making coffee the way I always did. Medium roast, a splash of cream, 2 sugars. Routine felt like a rope I could hold on to. The normalcy calmed me, but every sip reminded me I wasn't living in the same normal as yesterday. By the time he came down, stretching and yawning like the world owed him comfort, I was already dressed for work. "Morning," he said, kissing the top of my head. I stiffened, but he didn't notice. He rarely noticed anything, unless it affected him directly. "Morning," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. He glanced at the clock. "Did you get the groceries? Yesterday I didn't check." I did. He nodded absently and poured his coffee, scrolling through his phone with the same hand. "My mom said she might stop by this weekend. She thinks we should clean out the garage." I stirred my coffee slowly. His mother was always inserting herself into our home, giving opinions, making suggestions, acting as if she had partial ownership. But after hearing their conversation yesterday, her hints carried a different meaning. "Why the sudden interest in the garage?" I asked. "Just wants us to be organized," he said casually. Too casually. I said nothing. I just watched him. He was calmer today, lighter somehow, as if the secret he shared with his mother had relieved him. He didn't know I'd heard it. He didn't know I knew, and that ignorance made him careless. While he talked about his day, about meetings, he would probably skip, and errands. He would probably forget. I studied him. For the first time, I wasn't looking for signs of love or reassurance. I was looking for patterns. And suddenly, I began to see them everywhere. The trips he canceled last minute. The way he avoided any conversation about long-term plans. His reluctance to merge finances. The constant guilt-tripping. The sudden interest in my savings. My assets. My father's old cabin. They weren't cracks caused by time. They were cracks caused by intention. I drove to work through our quiet Ohio neighborhood, passing homes with well-kept lawns and American flags fluttering gently in the breeze. The world looked the same, but I didn't feel the same in it. My office, a small logistics company, had always been a refuge. I knew every person there, from the receptionist who collected ceramic frogs to the warehouse supervisor who greeted everyone with the same warm morning sunshine. These little pieces of ordinary life grounded me. But even at the office, the residue of that call lingered. During lunch, I pulled up bank statements on my phone. I'd done it 100 times before, but never with suspicion. This time, I looked for inconsistencies, and I found them. Withdrawals I didn't recognize. Payments to a credit card I didn't know he had. A recurring transfer, small but steady, to an account belonging to his mother. My throat tightened, not from shock, but from confirmation. He wasn't just enduring me. He was using me. As I scrolled through months of transactions, a co-worker, Harold, a widower, in his 70s, sat beside me. "You're frowning hard enough to bend your glasses," he said, with a gentle smile. I forced a small laugh, just looking at bills. "Bills'll do that," he chuckled. Then he grew quiet. "You okay today, Elaine? You look distant." I swallowed. "Just a long week." He didn't push. Older folks rarely do. They understand silence. They understand that some pains aren't meant to be unpacked in break rooms. When I got home that evening, my husband was in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone again. He looked up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, hun, thinking we should talk about the cabin." I froze in the doorway. "What about it?" "I just think we're holding on to something that's not practical. We could sell it, put the money into something useful." Useful? His favorite word when talking about my assets. I sat my purse down. "It's my father's cabin. It doesn't cost anything to keep." He sighed dramatically, as if I had inconvenienced him. "I'm just trying to think of our future." Our future. The same future he mocked on that call. I nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." His shoulders relaxed. He thought he had won a small battle. He didn't realize he had already lost the war. After dinner, he retreated to the living room to watch TV. I went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and pulled out a small notebook, one I had used over the years, for grocery lists and holiday plans. Tonight, it would serve a very different purpose. I wrote down everything I had discovered: dates, amounts, patterns, notes about the call I heard, phrases he used, tone of voice, laughter. I documented it all, not to weaponize it, but to protect myself. Because if a man could call his wife hell behind her back, he was capable of far worse in the light. Before going to bed, I went to the mirror and looked at myself longer than I had in months. I wasn't the pathetic woman he described. I wasn't the weak, oversensitive burden he painted me to be. I was steady. I was observant. And for the first time in a long time, I was awake. For the rest of that week, I moved through the house like a guest in someone else's home. Polite, quiet, entirely unnoticed. My husband didn't sense a thing. If anything, he seemed more relaxed, more confident in the role he believed he controlled. He thought he'd mastered the rhythm of our marriage. He pushed, I yielded. He criticized, I softened. He avoided responsibility, I carried it. But now, every word he spoke told me something new. Every sigh, every complaint, every casual remark about our finances that really meant mine. Once you recognize a mask, you can't unsee it. And my husband's mask had been on for so long that its edges were starting to curl. It started 2 nights after the call. He walked into the kitchen holding a stack of mail, mostly bills. He thumbed through them with a lazy confidence, stopping when he reached a letter from our insurance company. "We need to update our beneficiaries," he said casually. I dried my hands on a dish towel. Why? Because it's outdated, and it's just smart planning. He paused, testing the air. "Mom said." I lifted my eyes sharply. "Your mom." He faltered for half a second. "She just thinks we should streamline things. You know, simplify." I nodded slowly. Simplify. His new favorite word. I reached for the letter, but he held it back a moment, too long, as if debating whether I should see it at all. His eyes flickered, just briefly, toward my purse on the table. He knew my wallet was inside. My identification. Everything needed for signing documents. "I'll look at it later," I said, letting my voice soften into the familiar tone he expected. He smiled, relieved. "Good. It's better if we get ahead of these things. I don't want us scrambling if something happens." The irony almost made me laugh. Later that night, while he showered upstairs, I opened the insurance letter myself. It wasn't a form requesting updates. It was simply a notification that our current plan was still active. Nothing urgent, nothing requiring signatures. He lied, easily, effortlessly. But now I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was observing. The next day, I stopped by the home of my neighbor, Ruth Thompson. She was a retired attorney in her 70s, with the kind of sharp mind time never dulls. Her home smelled like peppermint and lemon polish, and she always kept a pot of coffee ready for company. When she opened the door, her kind eyes studied me. "Elaine, honey, come in. You look like you've been thinking too hard." I sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a warm mug. For a moment, I didn't speak. Ruth didn't push. Older folks understand that silence is sometimes the bridge to truth. Finally, I said, "Ruth, I need to ask you something, and I need you not to judge me." She raised a brow. "I practiced law for 40 years. Judgment is expensive and rarely helpful." I told her everything. Not all at once, not dramatically, just piece by piece, what I overheard, the laughter, the financial inconsistencies, the pressure to sign documents, and the uneasy feeling that my husband was becoming bolder, more entitled. She listened in a way only someone with decades of life behind them can quietly, with focus, and an understanding that came from experience, not pity. When I finished, she took a long breath and leaned back. "You are not wrong to be cautious," she said. "In fact, you're overdue." I swallowed hard. "I feel stupid." "You're married," she corrected. "Married people trust. Trust isn't stupidity. Misusing it is." Her words settled into me like stones, a grounding weight, not a burden. I hesitated before speaking again. "What should I do?" "Nothing," she said firmly. I blinked. "Nothing." She clasped her hands gently on the table. "Right now, silence is your advantage. If you confront him, you lose the one thing he doesn't know you have: awareness." I steadied myself, so I just let him play his hand. "Exactly," she said. "People with intentions like his reveal themselves when they feel safe. Let him feel safe." I exhaled slowly. It was advice I understood, even if it carried a quiet ache. Before leaving, Ruth placed a hand on my shoulder. Protect your documents, protect your accounts, and keep watching. The truth always surfaces when someone believes they're smarter than you. Driving home, I replayed her words. She was right. He thought he had me figured out. He thought my softness made me unprepared. But he didn't know that gentleness can sit beside strength. He didn't know I was taking notes. He didn't know I had stopped believing in him days ago. That evening, his mother stopped by unannounced, as she often did. She walked into our home with a superiority that made the lights seem dimmer. Lorraine glanced at my cooking simple chicken soup and wrinkled her nose. "Still making plain food, I see," she said. "You really should try new recipes. Men get bored easily." My husband chuckled like she'd said something clever. I stirred the pot slowly, as if her words rolled right off me. Some people like things simple. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She wasn't used to me responding at all. They sat in the living room, whispering. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught phrases, timing documents. She won't suspect money, just sitting there. Naive old Elaine. That's who they thought I was. I kept stirring. When dinner was ready, they joined me at the table. Lorraine watched me with the same look someone gives a stray dog curious, but always from a distance. Halfway through the meal, she said lightly, "You know, dear you, and my son should think about reorganizing your finances. It's irresponsible not to." I smiled at her politely. "You're right. It's something we'll consider." Her eyes flashed. She took the bait. Later that night, when they were talking in the driveway, they didn't realize I had stepped outside onto the side porch, quietly listening. "She's finally coming around," Lorraine whispered. "Told you she'd agree, eventually." My husband let out a satisfied sigh. "Yeah, she's easy. Just needs a little pressure." I didn't react, didn't move, didn't give myself away. Because Ruth was right. They were revealing themselves. And I was listening. The following week unfolded like a slow, deliberate lesson in clarity. Once my eyes were open, nothing looked the same. Not my husband's gestures, not his sudden bursts of fake affection, not his mother's constant intrusions, not even the walls of our own home. Everything began to feel staged, like I had walked backstage and finally seen the ropes, the wires, the painted scenery. And with every passing day, the truth became harder for him to hide. On Tuesday morning, my husband left early, under the pretense of a work meeting. He kissed my forehead, as though the night before hadn't ended, with him and his mother whispering about how easy I was to manipulate. I stayed at the kitchen table, long after he left, stirring a cooling cup of coffee, watching a small sliver of sun cast itself across the hardwood floor. For a moment, I considered confronting him, demanding the truth outright. But then I remembered Ruth's voice. Let him play his hand. I wasn't a woman who sought revenge. I just wanted honesty, respect, fairness. But he had chosen deceit, and now I had no choice but to protect myself. At work during lunch, I logged into our joint bank account, an account I rarely checked because the bills were all on autopay, and I trusted him to handle the smaller details. But trust was no longer my default. This time I wasn't skimming. I was hunting. The truth appeared quickly. Small transfers, just under the threshold, that would trigger alerts were being sent to a personal checking account I didn't recognize. Every 2 weeks, same amount, same day, same pattern. For nearly 10 months. I checked older statements. There were purchases for tools from a hardware store. We'd never been to restaurants we'd never eaten at a hotel booking that claimed to be for a work retreat that he'd told me was canceled. I didn't jump to conclusions. Not yet. But the puzzle pieces were forming an unmistakable shape. One I didn't want to look at directly, not yet. When I returned home that evening, I noticed something odd. A small cream-colored envelope sat on the hall table, addressed to my husband. It came from a credit union we didn't use. No logo I recognized. I picked it up and weighed it in my hand. Thin. A single-page letter, maybe two. Before I could decide what to do with it, his car pulled into the driveway. I placed the envelope exactly where it had been. Timing was becoming everything. He came in cheerful, almost humming. A man only hums when he believes his world is moving in the right direction. "Hey, hon," he said, lifting the envelope. "Just a bill." He tucked it quickly into his jacket pocket before heading upstairs. A bill. Except that credit union didn't send our bills, and he didn't want me to see it. At that point, suspicion was no longer a visitor. It had become a resident. That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the dim light of the living room with a notebook open on my lap. I wrote down the date of the mysterious envelope. Then, I wrote down every unexplained withdrawal I'd found, every suspicious transaction, every odd behavior from the past 6 months that I had brushed aside as stress or aging or marital rut. The truth was uglier. He had been preparing something. Slowly, carefully, confidently. But he wasn't nearly as clever as he thought. On Thursday during my lunch break, I drove to the credit union. It was a small building on the edge of town, one of those places retirees used, because they liked personal service more than convenience. I walked in with steady steps and a calm face. "Hi there," the teller said warmly. "How can I help you today?" "I need to confirm something," I said. "Do you have an account under the name James Porter?" She typed quickly. "Yes, we do." My heart beat once hard. "I'm his wife. Are we joint on that account?" She checked. "No, ma'am. It's individual." Individual. Against Ohio law for married couples who share certain assets. Against our verbal agreement when we first married. Against decency. I thanked her and left without asking anything further. I knew better than to dig deeper without legal standing. The last thing I wanted was to tip anyone off. But as I sat in my car, staring out at a row of maple trees, shedding their leaves, like truth, shedding its disguises, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Resolve. That evening, when my husband mentioned very casually that we should revisit financial paperwork this weekend, with his mother present, I simply smiled and said, "Of course." He grinned, a wide, relieved grin. He thought he had me. He truly believed I was gently folding myself back into his plan. He didn't know the ground beneath him was beginning to dissolve. The next day, I arranged to meet with a family law attorney, a woman named Ms. Harlow, recommended quietly by Ruth. She had silver hair, calm eyes, and the sort of presence that makes you feel safe just by being in the same room. After I told her everything, she closed her notebook slowly. "Elaine," she said, "you're dealing with financial manipulation, potential fraud, and emotional abuse. You're not imagining any of it." I inhaled sharply. "So, I'm not overreacting." She leaned forward. "You are underreacting." For the first time in weeks, I felt tears burn at the corners of my eyes. Not from sadness, from validation. "We'll gather everything," she continued. "Do not confront him. Do not change your behavior. Do not hint that you know. Just protect your documents. Open your own account. And keep gathering." "What happens next?" I asked. She gave a small, knowing smile. The moment he tries to push you into signing anything with or without his mother present, that's when we serve him. I exhaled slowly, so slowly it felt like months of tension leaving my body. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: safety. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally had a path, a plan, a strategy that didn't rely on hope or denial. When I walked through the front door, my husband greeted me from the couch, remote in hand. "Busy day?" he asked. I smiled warmly, exactly the way he expected. "You have no idea." Saturday arrived with an uneasy stillness, the kind that settles into a home right before a storm. I woke, early brewed coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, letting the steam brush against my face as I listened to the familiar creaks of our old house. For years, I'd found comfort in those sounds. Today, they felt like warnings. My husband came down around 9, dressed a little nicer than usual, for a weekend collared shirt, pressed jeans, hair combed. When he saw me, he offered a soft smile, the rehearsed kind he used whenever he wanted cooperation. "Mom will be here at noon," he said lightly, pouring his coffee. I nodded. "I'll be ready." He didn't notice how steady my voice was. He didn't notice anything these days, unless it threatened his plans. I spent the rest of the morning wiping counters, straightening cushions, and arranging the kitchen in a way that would leave no distractions, no reason to derail whatever scheme he and his mother were preparing. My movements were calm, intentional. A part of me was watching myself from a distance, surprised at the quiet strength guiding my hands. At 11:55, I heard the familiar hum of Lorraine's car in the driveway. She walked in without knocking, as always, wearing her usual cloud of floral perfume and a smile that never reached her eyes. "Elaine," she said, giving me a quick glance, "you look tired." "I slept fine," I replied evenly. She didn't like that answer. She liked when I apologized, when I shrank, when I justified myself. Today, I gave her nothing. We sat at the dining table, me on one side, my husband and his mother on the other. Like a tribunal, my husband slid a stack of documents toward me, printed, neatly clipped together. "Just routine updates," he said, with practiced ease. "Tax stuff, some financial streamlining. Mom thought we should look at these together." His mother nodded, folding her hands in a way that made her look like a benevolent judge. "Just to make sure everything is organized. You know, responsible." Responsible? Another word they like to use as a weapon. I picked up the papers, holding them delicately. The first page looked innocent, basic information, marital status, address. But a few lines down, my eyes caught something that tightened my chest. Assets, joint holdings, property designations. Under primary ownership, his name appeared first. Under shared property, the list included something that made my blood run cold. My father's cabin. I looked up slowly, keeping my expression neutral. Why is the cabin listed here? My husband smiled, as if the answer were perfectly harmless. "It's just a formality. For liability." "Liability?" He shrugged. "It's just easier if it's all under one umbrella. We've talked about it before." No, he had talked. I had resisted, repeatedly. Lorraine leaned forward with faux concern. "It's really best for both of you, dear. You don't want loose ends. And if, heaven forbid, anything happened to you, James should have access." Her words dropped like stones in a quiet pond. I inhaled slowly. Why the rush? My husband offered a light laugh. "Elaine, you overthink everything. It's not a big deal. Just sign and we'll get lunch." Sign? Just sign. For a moment, I imagined who I used to be, the woman who wanted peace, more than dignity. The woman who would have said, "If it makes you feel better, fine." The woman who trusted her husband because trust was the only way she knew how to love. But that woman was gone. I flipped the page, then the next, and the next, my eyes calm scanning. Much of the language was vague, but strategic. If I signed these papers, I would lose control over my savings, my cabin, and anything tied to my name. He wasn't just manipulating me. He was positioning himself. Silently, efficiently, confidently. I set the papers down gently. I'd like to think it over. My husband stiffened. "Elaine, what's there to think about?" His mother added quickly, "It's just paperwork. Don't make this difficult." I folded my hands and gave a gentle smile. "I'm not making anything difficult. I just want to read it carefully." They exchanged a glance, one filled with irritation and calculation. "Elaine," my husband said, voice lowering, "why don't you trust me?" For the first time in our marriage, his question didn't hurt. I held his gaze. Trust is a two-way street. He swallowed hard. I stood collecting my purse calmly. "I'll be back in a moment." I walked to the hallway bathroom and closed the door softly. Not rushed, not dramatic. Inside, I pulled out my phone and photographed every page of the documents. I didn't tremble. I didn't hesitate. I wasn't afraid. I was documenting, gathering, protecting myself. When I returned to the dining room, they both looked up expectantly. "I'm not signing anything today," I said simply. "I want more time." My husband exhaled sharply. "You're being unreasonable." Lorraine scoffed. "I always said she was too emotional." But I felt remarkably steady. He pushed the papers back toward me harder this time. "We need this done, Elaine. Today." I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who promised partnership. The man who had laughed about me behind my back. The man who thought silence meant compliance. "I'm not signing," I repeated, voice firm. He sat back, jaw tight. Lorraine muttered something under her breath about ungrateful wives, but I didn't acknowledge her. The rest of the afternoon passed in stiff, uncomfortable silence. Eventually, Lorraine left with a huff, muttering about how some women just can't appreciate good intentions. My husband spent the evening sulking in front of the TV, slamming cabinet doors for dramatic effect. That night, while he ranted to his mother over the phone in the living room, he didn't know the call spilled into the hallway. He didn't know I was standing there, listening quietly, just as I had the first time. "She's being stubborn," he hissed. His mother replied, "Pressure her. She always caves. Do not let up." He groaned. "If she would just sign, we'd finally get access. Then we can reorganize everything. I'm tired of waiting." My breath caught, not from shock, but from confirmation. He wasn't trying to protect our future. He was trying to secure his. I stepped away from the hallway, heart steady, mind clear. He didn't know it yet. But the moment he pushed those papers toward me was the moment he lost. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual, as if every lie my husband had told had settled into the walls overnight. He moved quietly, avoiding eye contact, and I could sense the tension building inside him, like a kettle ready to whistle. He thought I was being defiant. He thought I was a stubborn wife, resisting reasonable requests. He didn't realize I had already stepped outside the version of me he controlled. He didn't realize the ground beneath him had already shifted. I walked downstairs to find him pacing the kitchen with his phone pressed to his ear. He lowered his voice when he saw me turning his back, as if that could shield his words. "No, she didn't sign," he whispered sharply. "She's dragging her feet again." A pause. His mother's muffled voice came through the speaker, even from where I stood. "Well, push harder," she snapped. "She caves under pressure. She always has." I pretended not to hear as I reached for a glass of water. He ended the call abruptly and turned to me with forced calm. "We need to revisit the paperwork later." I nodded softly. "Of course." His expression softened, not from affection, but from triumph. He thought my tone signaled surrender. He thought I'd spent the night rethinking, regretting, reconsidering. He didn't know I'd spent the night preparing. After he left for work, I drove straight to Miss Harlow's office. She greeted me with the same steady composure she'd shown at our first meeting. I handed her the photos of the documents I'd taken. She flipped through them slowly, eyes narrowing. "This isn't streamlining," she said. "This is asset transfer, and his mother is clearly involved." I nodded. "That's what I thought." She folded her hands. "Elaine, listen carefully. You've done everything right. You've documented. You haven't confronted. You've stayed steady. We're ready to move forward." I inhaled softly. "What happens now?" "We file," she said. "Divorce with allegations of financial manipulation, coercion, and attempted fraud. And based on what you've given me, we'll request protection of your assets effective immediately." I felt my pulse steady, not fast, not frantic, just steady. "Will he know?" "He will," she said calmly, "and not in the way he expects. He thinks he's cornering you. Instead, he's about to be served." Her words didn't scare me. They settled into me like the final piece of a puzzle. Before leaving, she placed a gentle hand on my arm. "When a man reveals who he is, don't mourn the illusion. Prepare for the truth. You've already done that." I left the office feeling lighter than I had in months. That afternoon, I took small steps that felt enormous. I visited the bank and opened a separate account in my name only. I transferred my personal savings money, earned through decades of work and sacrifice, into the secure account. I changed the login credentials for my retirement plan. I secured my Social Security card birth certificate and the deed to my father's cabin in a safe deposit box. Every action was deliberate, every movement purposeful, every click, every signature, every pen stroke reclaimed a piece of myself. When I returned home, the house was quiet until my husband walked in. He slammed the door harder than usual. "You didn't answer my text." "I was busy," I said simply. His jaw tightened. "We need to finalize the paperwork tonight." I hung my coat calmly. "We'll see." He stared at me, searching for the compliant wife he thought he could bend. For a moment, confusion flickered in his eyes. He could sense something was different, but he couldn't place it. That made him nervous. "Good." On Thursday evening, while he showered upstairs, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and called Ruth. She answered on the second ring. "Well?" she asked gently. "It's happening," I said. "Tomorrow morning." She breathed out slowly. "Good. You're ready." "I think so." "No," she corrected softly. "You know, so." Her confidence strengthened something inside me that had long gone quiet. The next morning, everything unfolded with a precision I didn't expect. I was at work when Miss Harlow called. "It's done. The papers are filed. The court has approved the motion for asset protection. There will be no transferring, withdrawing, or adjusting anything without your consent." I closed my eyes, letting the news wash over me. "And the service?" I asked. "He'll receive the documents within the hour." I thanked her, hung up, and sat at my desk, breathing deeply. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. It was simply beating stronger than before. At 11:27 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Ruth. Just saw a police cruiser and a process server pull into your driveway. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with the weight of finality. A second message followed a minute later. He answered the door. A third. He did not take it well. I exhaled slowly, almost peacefully. The unraveling had begun. When I got home, later that afternoon, his car was in the driveway. He burst through the front door the moment I stepped onto the porch, anger radiating off him, like heat from asphalt. "What did you do?" he yelled. "What is this?" He shoved the divorce documents toward me, pages creased, some wrinkled, as if he'd crushed them in his fist. I looked at him with calm, unwavering eyes. I protected myself. "You blindsided me." I lifted a brow. "Did I?" He froze, just long enough to reveal the truth. He knew exactly what he'd been doing. The paperwork he pushed, the lies, the hidden accounts, the manipulation. Yes, he knew. "You didn't have to do this," he said, voice trembling with anger rather than grief. "We could have handled it together." I inhaled softly. "You were handling it without me." He scoffed. "Oh, don't play innocent. You always twist things." "I heard you," I said quietly. He blinked. "What?" "I heard your call," I continued. "I heard you tell your mother that living with me is hell. I heard you say you stayed for the money. I heard you laugh." His face went pale, then red, then pale again. You weren't supposed to." "No," I said, voice firm. "I wasn't." Silence settled between us, heavy, undeniable. Then for the first time in years, he looked small. Not because I shrank, but because I finally stopped shrinking. He tried to regain control. "This is all a misunderstanding. You're blowing things." "Stop," I said. "There's no misunderstanding, just truth." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, but there was nothing left for him to say. He wasn't unraveling because I left. He was unraveling because I stopped believing him. When he finally walked out that afternoon, slamming the front door so hard, the picture frames rattled, what I felt wasn't relief or triumph. It was quiet, a quiet so complete it pressed against my ears. The kind of quiet you don't realize you've been starving for until it finally arrives. I stood in the entryway for a long minute, staring at the door he'd stormed, through the air still vibrating with the echo of his anger. I expected tears, maybe shaking hands, maybe the ache of a 22-year marriage collapsing at my feet. But none of that came. Instead, my chest expanded with something unfamiliar space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to finally be myself again. I walked into the living room and opened the windows, not because it was stuffy, but because the house needed new air, untouched by manipulation guilt or the heavy scent of his mother's perfume. The breeze that drifted in felt like a blessing. That evening, I packed a small suitcase, not because I was running, but because I wanted distance while the divorce process began. I folded clothes slowly, methodically, as though each shirt and sweater was another step toward a life I had forgotten how to imagine. Before leaving, I walked through each room quietly. The home we built together no longer felt shared. It felt like a stage I had finally stepped off of. I drove to my father's cabin as the sun dipped low, casting gold across the fields. The cabin sat at the edge of a wooded area, simple and sturdy, smelling faintly of pine, even from the driveway. When I unlocked the door, the familiar scent wrapped around me like an old quilt. It was small. It was quiet. It was mine. I set my suitcase down, lit a small lamp, and sank into the old armchair my father used to sit in. For the first time in what felt like years, I let my body relax fully. My breath slowed, my shoulders loosened, my mind softened enough to let memories drift through some painful, some warm, all real. The next morning, I made coffee on the cast iron stove, just like my father used to. The rich smell filled the cabin, and I stood at the doorway with my mug, watching the sun rise through the trees. I felt something shift inside me, subtle but deep, like thawing after a long winter. As the divorce moved forward, things unfolded predictably. He tried to call. Then he texted first angry messages, then pleading ones, then long, rambling apologies that said nothing real. When I didn't respond, he sent an email claiming it was all just a joke, that he didn't mean any of it, that everyone vents. Everyone doesn't vent about enduring their spouse for money. I stayed silent, not out of revenge, out of self-respect. Weeks passed. Papers were filed. His attorney made requests. My attorney rejected the ones meant to drain me. When financial misconduct was exposed, he panicked. When the court protected my cabin and savings, his panic turned to outrage. He never once apologized sincerely. Not once did he acknowledge what he had done. His messages always circled around the same idea that I had overreacted, that I should have handled it privately, that I should have given him another chance. He said everything except the only words that mattered. I was wrong. And so I moved forward. At 60 years old, I rebuilt my life one small, meaningful piece at a time. I drove into town for groceries without the familiar knot in my stomach. I cooked meals without criticism hovering behind me. I took long walks through the woods behind the cabin, listening to the leaves crunch under my boots and the birds calling overhead. The world felt bigger, kinder, more honest. I also went to therapy for the first time in my life. The counselor, kind-eyed, steady-voiced, helped me unravel the knots of years spent trying to please someone who could never be pleased. She helped me understand that my silence had been survival, not weakness, that my loyalty had been love, not foolishness, that my boundaries now were not punishment, but healing. One afternoon, about 3 months after the papers were filed, he showed up at the cabin unannounced. I saw him through the window before he'd even reached the porch, disheveled, anxious, holding a manila envelope as though it was proof of something. He knocked, hard. I opened the door only halfway. "What do you want?" He blinked, startled by the firmness in my voice. I wanted to talk. "There's nothing left to talk about." He swallowed. "I made mistakes. I know that. Mistakes are forgetting a birthday," I replied softly. "Mistakes are saying something you regret and apologizing immediately. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern." He took a shaky breath. "I didn't mean what I said on the call. I was venting." I held his gaze. "You weren't venting. You were honest." He flinched. I stayed, I continued, because I believed in the vows we made. You stayed because you wanted what I had. Those are not the same thing. He opened his mouth, closed it, then finally whispered, "So that's it." "That's it," I said. And for the first time since the day I overheard that call, he fell completely silent. I closed the door gently, not in anger, but in finality. After he left, I sat on the porch, watching the sun drift lower behind the trees. The world felt calm again, untouched by his chaos. In that moment, I realized something important. The greatest revenge I ever took wasn't the divorce, or the protection of my assets, or the unraveling of his plans. The greatest revenge was healing. The greatest victory was peace. And the greatest transformation was remembering who I had been before someone tried to make me feel small. To those listening, especially those in my age group, men and women who have lived long enough to know life's shortcuts and heartbreaks, I want to say something from the quiet center of my experience. Protect your voice, protect your worth, protect your peace. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If your spirit feels heavy, listen. If someone shows you their truth, believe it the first time. You deserve honesty. You deserve respect. You deserve love that doesn't shrink you. And if my story teaches anything, let it be this. Silence can protect you, but speaking your truth can free you. Thank you for listening. If my journey touched, you share it with someone who needs strength today. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories of courage, justice, and quiet resilience, feel free to join me again.